The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Welcome to another episode of Speaking with the Senator. I'm Senator Kevin Avard, and I represent District 12 here in New Hampshire. And today, we're going to be talking about politics, and we're going to be talking about a particular primary right now, and that is in District 2 for the United States Congress seat. And today I have one of the candidates with me, Lynne Blankenbeker.
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Yay.
And thank you for having me. Yes, you do.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
We're glad to have you. And just for the record, Lynne has actually served with me in 2011 and 12.
Correct. Well, no. 2009, 10, and 11.
Okay.
And through 12.
Yes. Through 12,
yes.
As a state representative.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Those were interesting days.
Yes, they were. But, we did a lot of really great things. We balanced the budget. We advanced our conservative platform. I think we did a lot of really good things during that time.
And you were in leadership back then.
I was.
Recall.
As a freshman, I was the vice chair of State and Federal Relations and Veterans Affairs.
Now, how did you get that role? Why were you selected for that?
I think that the speaker and the leadership recognized my my leadership abilities, especially since I'm a career military officer. And so I think that they saw that I had a lot of expertise in that area. For 32 years I've been now, but at that time it was like 26 years. I had been a combat nurse. And so I think they recognized that I had a lot of experience with veterans issues, and then, like I said, I think just being a career military officer, they valued that leadership experience I had.
You're a combat nurse?
Yes.
For?
The United States Navy now. I started out as an Air Force nurse, and then, through time, it evolved to becoming a Navy reservist. And so, yes.
And how long have you been serving?
32 years.
32 years.
Yes.
Now, were you in Afghanistan at any point?
I was. So
Really?
I served in Afghanistan from 2011 to 2012.
So that brings up a question. Some people have said, well, why have you gotten into the race so late?
Well, because I didn't come off active duty until till January 5th of this year. So, as a combat nurse, I know you probably know I'm also an attorney, and then my legislative background from working in the House of Representatives. I was asked to go to the Pentagon in 2012 for a 2-year assignment right after I came back from Afghanistan to do healthcare policy. And as you can imagine, that was under the Obama administration when we were ramping up the Affordable Care Act. And so they needed somebody who had nursing experience or healthcare experience, certainly combat experience because we had so many wounded warriors coming back, legislative experience, so they knew how to deal with Congress, and then the legal experience, so we knew how to sift through and synthesize and understand laws. And so I was the only nurse they had in the inventory that had that background. So they brought me on active duty in 2012, what was supposed to be a 2-year assignment. I ended up staying 5.5 years because, of course, we developed the Affordable Care Act, and then with the new administration, that sort of pieces and parts of it got repealed. And in that time, we also had a lot of other I would say pretty significant things happen in the arena of healthcare, transgenders in the military, and what we were going to do for managing that transgender care. So yeah.
Was that a tough issue to deal with?
It was a very tough issue because, as you know, it's very inflammatory. There's people on both sides who feel very strongly both ways. For us, from a healthcare perspective in the military, it had very significant implications. Number one, gender reassignment procedures start with hormone therapy and end at the end of surgery, and that takes years and years and years and years, and so you can't get through that type of therapy in a short period of time. while you're undergoing that therapy, you're not a mobilization-ready asset, and that's a significant when only 1% of the military is wearing a uniform right now. If we have any number of people that aren't ready to go, you can't utilize them in a wartime situation, so that means that those who are ready get mobilized over and over and over again. And then we develop things like battle fatigue, and so we had to think about all those things.
Right. And so you treated a lot of veterans that were military folks that were injured in the war, and you
Yes.
got to know many of them. And so you had to basically finish your commission before you could run for office. Is that correct?
Well, I had to finish out that tour, so I had to come off of active duty. As reservists, we can still serve on Capitol Hill in the Senate. Lindsey Graham, for example, is a senator and was an Air Force reservist. General Heck was an Army reservist and still serving in both capacities. They have a special reserve unit for people who are doing both.
That's interesting. So what made you decide to run for Congress?
Well, when I was in the Pentagon, while I was at the Pentagon, I really had a front row seat to the dysfunction that was going on there. And government shutdowns and continuing resolutions just chip away at our national security. And every time the government shut down while I was on active duty, all the civilians had to go home. I don't know if you know this, but the Pentagon is made up of 60% civilians and 40% military. So when the government shut down, those 60% couldn't come to work. Now you can only imagine how difficult it is if 60% of your workforce couldn't come to work today. You can't keep operations going. And we are in a war, and 60% of our folks couldn't come to work.
Right.
And that was just the Pentagon. Now multiply that across. And of course, once I came off of active duty and I became a reservist again, the same thing was happening. Every time there was a continuing resolution and they shut the government down, we were precluded from or prohibited from drilling. So for me, in January, I flew out to San Diego to drill. Government was shut down. I had to fly right back home. I got there on Friday. I flew home on Saturday on my own dime. And then that happened again in February. We had the government shut down on a drill weekend. And it started to happen in March, but then the president said no more shutdowns. We're going to pass a budget, and and that's another discussion. But certainly, you can't keep going like that. It really chips away at our readiness.
Yeah, and how does that affect the morale?
Oh, terrible. I don't know how you keep, it's very, very hard. I'm the commanding officer of a medical unit that has 875 Navy Reserve medicine sailors out in San Diego.
What is your rank?
I'm a Navy captain, so
You're a
that's
captain.
like the equivalent of an Army colonel or an Air Force colonel. It's an 06.
Of course. I didn't know.
For anybody who's listening who knows anything about the military. So, it's very hard to keep people motivated when they take off time from their civilian jobs, especially in the reserves. They take off time from their civilian jobs. They find adequate provisions for their family for the weekend. Many of them, like me, I buy a plane ticket. I fly all the way out to San Diego. And then to have the government shut down and you can't drill and you can't train.
Is it true that some military folks are on food stamps?
Yes. Yes, and it is also true that some of our reservists live in their cars.
Really?
Yes, it is very true.
And how do you hope to change things?
Well, certainly we need to look at our national budget. We need to look at what our priorities are and where we need to spend that money. I certainly am not about overtaxing. We need to look at some of those departments and those agencies that probably can use some fat trimming.
Streamlining.
Yes, we absolutely. And we also need to look at the military too. We need to look at that budget, make sure we're spending the military money smartly, and make sure that we are compensating those who are working and defending this nation adequately and properly.
Any thoughts about the North Korea communications?
Wow. Well, I have to say, I think that certainly President Trump has done a phenomenal job getting North Korea and South Korea talking, and I'm just...
We've come a long way, baby, haven't we?
Oh, yes, we have. This is effectively the Berlin Wall coming down and for us. And certainly, no joking aside here, I think the wrong president got the Peace Prize, because certainly I think getting North Korea and South Korea talking is huge.
I think President Obama got it before he did anything.
I know, right? Right, that's what I said. I think the wrong president got it, Certainly with President Trump's ability to get nations talking, which is what we need to do, I tell you, I am there's no greater honor than caring for our warriors and their families and our veterans to me. And I love what I do in the Navy. But if I never have to care for another combat soldier again, I will not be upset.
You'd rather talk than fight.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think President Trump is doing a great job with this first step of getting North Korea and South Korea together. You know, I don't think China wants all that hot mess over there either.
No. So, are you from New Hampshire originally?
I grew up in Florida. So my family, my mom and my dad, my mom was a nurse. My dad was a civil service, and so he was stationed or worked near Eglin Air Force Base, which is in the panhandle of Florida. And then when I went to college, I went into ROTC and then got my Air Force commission. And I was kind of stationed all over. I was stationed in northern Maine and in Virginia, and ultimately I was stationed in California. So I went to Desert Storm, was stationed overseas for that, you know, supported that war. And when I came home, my husband and I had decided to start our family. And so we were living in California at the time, and we knew absolutely we did not want to raise a child in California. His family had settled in the Pacific Northwest, not a climate I'm crazy, you know, about. My family was in the Southeast, again, not
Nice
a climate.
compromise, come up northeast.
Well,
right?
it wasn't a climate he was really super crazy about either. So we were just looking for the perfect place to raise a child, and we, honest to goodness, literally got in our car and drove the entire lower 48 states trying to find the perfect place to raise our family. And back then, this was before the Google, we had to do all the research on our own, and we looked at crime rate and education and tax rate. And we loved the state motto, live free or die. We felt like the government wasn't going to get involved in our, you know, our day-to-day parenting and how we were going to raise our child.
Right.
We looked at quality of life. And of course, as you know, every time you look at U.S. News and World Reports or anybody else, what are the top 10 cities? Someplace in New Hampshire, someplace in New Hampshire, someplace in New Hampshire. So it was an easy decision for us. We settled on the western side of the state over in Lebanon. And then in 2004, we moved to Concord when I came to law school.
Where'd you go to law school?
Franklin Pierce.
Of course.
So, yes.
It's the law school there.
The only law school in New Hampshire, yeah.
And what drew you to the Capitol as a state rep?
Oh, my goodness.
What was the deciding factor to make you run?
Yeah, so, you mean Capitol Hill or New Hampshire?
New Hampshire.
Oh, so I was working for a law firm at the time, and they had a lobby practice. And my boss said, you know, he used to send me over to the House periodically to monitor bills that were going on in committee. I knew nothing about the legislature. I'd never been in the State House before until then. Excuse me. And then, but there was a bill coming before the House. It was the bill about should we repeal the law that requires teenage girls to have an abortion, requires parental notification before a teenage girl can have an abortion.
Which was a hot issue.
It was a very hot issue. So he said, Lynn, you got a 14-year-old daughter, you should go listen to this. So I'm sitting up in the gallery, looking down on the House floor. At the time, I did not know the person, but it was Nancy Elliott at the Well. She was giving what I thought was very valuable testimony about Sandra Day O'Connor's last decision in the Supreme Court and how they had reviewed the New Hampshire law and found it to be constitutional because judicial bypass was in there, and so it was fine. So I'm listening intently to this testimony, but literally 3/4 of the seats were empty.
Really?
Yes, it was about an empty House. And then, so I had the wherewithal to look down on the House floor, look at those seats, figure out where my 5 representatives were sitting, and guess what? Not a one of them were in their seats. So then they called a roll call, which I didn't know anything about, and this herd of people came running in, and all 5 of my reps came, and they voted to take away my right as a parent, and they ran back out. And I was shocked. I couldn't believe that. I never felt more underrepresented in my whole life. And I was like, one of those people should have voted the way I would have voted. I've put,
For balance.
Right? But it was, it was a Democrat-run House at the time. So my right as a parent, like that, was taken away from me.
So you believe in parental rights?
I do believe in parental rights. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And so there we had it. So I thought, you know what? I could put my name on the ballot and do a better job. So I took my $2, got a new pair of sneakers, and started walking. And
good for you.
Yeah, we won that election by 17 votes.
Yeah, I think I won my first one by 9 or 10.
Yeah. Yeah.
Every vote does count.
Every vote does count.
Senator,
and I think you really have to connect with the people in your community.
Yeah. Senator French recently won his election by 13 votes.
I knew we were kindred spirits.
Who is it? Victoria Sullivan won by 1 or 2 votes. And there was a recount.
Recount, yeah.
And so every vote does count. And it is, people say, well, my vote doesn't count. Oh, yes, it does.
Yes, it does. Yes,
Especially
it does.
in New Hampshire.
And it's so important that people get out and vote. I just don't think, and it's funny because you asked why I'm running. So I saw this dysfunction that was going on in Congress, and
Yeah, let me interrupt you right there. Dysfunction. There were people that were actually sitting on the Congress floor having a tantrum. What was that all about?
Oh my gosh, I don't know, but you know what? That lack of maturity and certainly that lack of civility has got to go. And that's one of the things that I think I can bring to Congress. As a military person, it doesn't matter what uniform we wear or the color of our skin, our gender. It doesn't matter our religious beliefs or our political background. At the end of the day, we all stand up and we do what's right. And we take care of America and we protect and defend the Constitution. And if 1 million people in your United States military can do that, 435 people in your Congress can certainly do that.
Right.
And I want to bring that ethos with me. And I've been really fortunate. I've been endorsed by MAVPAC, which is the War Veterans Fund. They picked 5 candidates of all of us that are running who had served in Iraq or Afghanistan or both, who sort of embodied this value of bringing civility to Congress. And they have brought us together twice now, and the third time will be in D.C. Later this month. So we met in Miami and we met in Dallas. And so I feel like I already have a coalition of shipmates, for lack of a better word, to go with me. We've had a pilot, we got a couple of special forces guys, so I feel like we get coverage from the air and coverage from the ground, and then in comes the nurse to clean up the mess, right? Right?
Wow.
So, but I already have a coalition going in. There's 5 of us who feel very strongly the same way. And I think if I go with reinforcements, we can change the culture. It's not going to happen overnight, but it will happen.
Right, working as a team. And of course, you're used to working as a team. What are some of the contrasts between you and Representative Custer that you want to highlight?
Oh my goodness. Well, certainly I think as I've gotten out and I've talked to folks, they feel very underrepresented. So I think, I've been in the community, I've been listening to the folks, and one of the things I keep hearing is that they never see Representative Custer. She's never around. And so I think that is one way that I certainly would distinguish myself, by being present more in the state and being more available. Another way I think I could distinguish myself is I do have a 32-year career military service, and she has not served. And while she's sitting over in Congress holding her hand up against financing our military, I was sitting over in Afghanistan holding the hands of wounded warriors who were giving limbs and life to support and defend this country. So I think we're very polar opposites there. My understanding and my appreciation and my deck plate experiences in the military, she just doesn't have. I think also, the fact that I didn't come from a family of privilege. I came from a very poor family in Florida, and my mother was a World War II nurse. My father was a Marine at the Kwajalein Atoll. My parents worked very hard, and I lost
A Marine of the what?
in the Kwajalein Atoll during World War II, the Battle of the Marshall Islands, and he was a radioman. And my family taught us this very strong work ethic. We didn't have anything, and my father died when I was 12. My mother was left to raise 5 children and an elderly grandmother living at home with us with Alzheimer's in a very small house, and that's what I grew up with. I didn't get my own bedroom till I was 14, and I shared a bed with my sister until then. So, and I only got the bed because my grandma died. But that's just the way it was. I came from a poor family. I don't know what it's like to be of privilege. And I think Miss Custer was raised in a family that was different. And so I understand what it's like to be a struggling family.
And serving.
And serving.
And I don't know if she served in the House or not.
I don't know. I know her mother maybe did some, I don't know. I don't.
And you know where Benghazi is, right?
I do know where Benghazi is. I do.
Somewhere in the Middle East?
Somewhere where some poor people, unfortunately, yeah.
So as far as, lowering taxes, what do you think about the president's tax plan?
Oh my gosh, the tax plan has been phenomenal. Look at it, what is it, 89, 90% of Granite Staters are benefiting from that. It blows my mind that Representative Custer wouldn't vote for that and wouldn't support the Granite State. It's done such great things, and those crumbs in our Granite Staters' pockets.
I was just thinking about that today on my way here. I was thinking I would rather have the crumbs from Trump than the change from Obama.
There you go. Yeah, that's a very well put.
Because we didn't benefit a whole lot, and
No.
people are trying to say that he saved the economy, but I don't see it. We're $20 trillion into debt, and in this last budget, I think there was some excessive spending, but I think the president actually bit the bullet for the military.
That's exactly it. I think he was between a rock and a hard place. He had a terrible, probably a budget that he didn't really want, but his other choice was to shut the government down for the third month in a row, and I don't think he could do that. Especially what happened right after that? Syria. Then what happened? North Korea. We can't have our national defense weakened and weakened and weakened and weakened. And, there's a deterrent factor to us being strong.
What blows my mind is that Obama gave the world's leading supporter of terrorists hundreds of billions of dollars. I just don't understand the logic to that. Somebody said, well, we owed it to them. It was their money. But my reply is, what about Beirut? Mm-hmm. What about those Marines that were killed in Beirut? What about their lives? Doesn't that matter?
Didn't that matter? Yeah.
Who gives $100 billion to a terrorist organization? And what is that going to go to? Mm-hmm. I don't think that the media really put that out there, but we had Iran-Contra. Do you remember that?
Yeah, boy, yeah, the Illinois.
Because of the trading and for hostages and blah, blah, blah. But $100 billion or billions of dollars didn't end up in unmarked currency on a pallet in Iran. And yet, you get a pass. Mm-hmm. I would hope that if you get elected, if Trump did something like that, that you would say, hey, wait a minute.
Yeah,
time out.
Yeah, time out, right.
Regardless whether he's a Republican or Democrat.
Oh, absolutely. I've always said that it doesn't matter. If the policy is good for the Granite State, I'm going to vote for it. Mm-hmm. And if the policy is not good, regardless of who our president is, I won't vote for it. You have to. The job is called representative first, right. And you have to represent your district. And I want to go back to just the time you were talking about the difference between the Obama and the Trump administrations. I served under both administrations in the military, and under the Obama administration, when I went to Afghanistan, I was given a gun and I was given 15 bullets, but I was told the two couldn't come together. I was further told that I'd be court-martialed if I did not come home with 15 bullets.
So the rules of engagement
were very different. So because I at that point had been a 26-year career officer and was very proud of my service, I was not going to be dishonorably discharged and lose everything I had worked so hard for by losing a bullet. So have you ever had surgery before?
Yeah.
Oh, well, so have you had surgical tape stuck to you? Some sort of tape? Yeah.
On my arm?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. You know how hard that is to get off. I surgically taped my bullets into my magazine so I wouldn't lose them. That was never, trying to get that off 9 months later, and it was all hot and gummed up and full of sand and dirt, was a mess, right? But I'm proud to say I came home with my 15 bullets and didn't get court-martialed. Fast forward to the Trump administration, and when President Trump became our president, he came and talked to us all at Henderson Hall and at Fort Myer. And I was sitting in the audience, and he said to us, look, he said, the generals are going to fight the war. You guys know how to fight this. Congress doesn't. We don't have any generals in Congress. So go fight the war. We're no longer going to nation rebuild. We're not sending billions of dollars over there to rebuild the nation. That is not your mission anymore. For people that hate us. Right. That is not your mission anymore. And finally, he said, you have one objective. Win. That is it. There is no other objective. And so the difference between the Chief of Naval Operations under the Obama administration, where we had this placemat with all these words and these purple and yellow and blue and gold lines of effort and all this stuff, and we didn't understand the mission. Then in comes the Chief of Naval Operations under President Trump, and he says, your mission is to win. And it was simple. We knew what we had to do to win the war. And so I think that there was a difference there. We had this terrible Shona Bashona thing where we were shoulder by shoulder working with the Afghans all the time, and we were so culturally sensitive to the Afghan nation while we were over there fighting a war on their soil against their people, which I thought was so bizarre under the Obama administration. And we had a woman come in, an Afghan woman who had been injured, and we saw locals, contractors, military working dogs. We saw the military, obviously. So we had a broad base of patients. But this woman had come in, and one of the things that we always did before a patient came into the hospital proper itself was strip them down to make sure they didn't have a bomb on them. But the women, we were culturally sensitive, didn't do that too. So she makes it into the hospital fully dressed. And as a woman, I was called to go care for her. And as we were cutting off her clothes, I reached around, and don't you know, she had a bomb on her. And yeah, what a difference with this cultural sensitivity. So I had to move all of the patients. We had to move them out of the ICU. We had American soldiers on ventilators who were gravely injured, waiting for their medevac flights, and they were now sitting in the hot parking lot on a ventilator while we got somebody to come detonate this bomb, or at least determine whether or not it was going to blow up in the trauma bay.
Well,
Yeah.
that's
Different administrations. We won't see that again.
completely different administration. I think right now the president is passing out some pardons, and there is a gentleman who, because of the rules of engagement, is now in prison. In wartime, he had a split second to make a decision whether to shoot or be shot. He shot, he killed, and now he's in for murder in a war scene. That's unheard of. And I remember my son telling me about that.
Yeah.
He served in Afghanistan. He saw war. He was there in Afghanistan, and he sent me back pictures. But he went down to Kentucky before he was shipped over, and they said, "Dad, the rules of engagement, the lawyers are telling us we can't point, blah, 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 blah." And I said to him, "Mike, whatever you do, you shoot, and we'll have you back on this end as if your life is threatened." A soldier shouldn't have to make that split decision. It's just not right. We can go on for a long time. So
Yes,
how
you
do we get to see? You got a website?
I do. Blankenbeker.com, BLANKENBEKER, or you can try Lynne, LYNNE, 4, Congress. Either one will get you to my site, and there's great ways to sign up to help, great ways to learn more about the campaign, and certainly a big donate button like we all need.
Do you have signs if somebody wants to put a sign up? Or
Yep, we just
bumper
ordered signs.
stickers?
Those will be in soon. We have lots of bumper stickers. Folks can contact our campaign right through there and sign up to get a sign, sign up to volunteer to help, phone bank, walk, whatever.
You want to look at the camera and ask the people to vote for you?
Well, I sure hope that folks are concerned about getting a good conservative candidate in the House. We need some reinforcements for our president. We certainly need to get some good policies passed for our country and definitely for the Granite State. So please consider Lynne Blankenbeker for Congress. I'd be honored to be your representative.
And thank you for watching Speaking with the Senator. We hope that this segment informs you of a great candidate here in New Hampshire for the 2nd Congressional seat of Congress.
Thanks so much.
Thank
And
you
thanks
very
for
much.
raising a patriot.
Hey, I have 3 of them.
I know.
My daughter is in Georgia at Fort Benning, and my other one served, and I didn't think I'd have a military family.
Well, you know what? It's a hard thing to do today. Only 1% of the folks in this nation are wearing a uniform, and the fact that 3 of your kids are filling that 1%, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Until next week.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.